30 minutes of power.
Welcome to Top 30 Minutes of Power, a podcast dedicated to encourage, educate, and inspire godly women to pursue their passions, with hosts Jory O'Neill and Nicole Salter. Thanks for coming. Let's get ready to power up. Hello and welcome everybody to another wonderful episode of 30 Minutes of Power. I am here today interviewing a magical woman. This woman is, she's an actress. She is a blogger. She is a business owner. She is a theatrical performer, and she's my new friend. So I'm super excited to introduce to my community, my new friend, Katie Del Rocco. Katie, how are you, friend?
Oh, thanks, Jory. I love it. I am happy to be here. I'm doing well.
All right. Good news all around. So I invited Katie here today to share a little bit about her story. So most of you who tune into this podcast or who have followed me in any way, shape, or form, you know that I'm all things like performing arts, right? Spoken word, rap, hip hop, dance, live theater. And Katie is a woman after my own heart. She has not only written, but produced and starred in one-woman plays. Like, I aspire to do this one day, but she's like already doing it. So I'm super intrigued and excited to learn how the heck this all came about. So Katie, thank you again just for taking time out to be here with us. I know you are actually running through lines this week for your upcoming show. So super excited that you stole away a few moments. How did this all come about? Like, where did it begin, this love for performing?
Yeah, well, I mean, thanks again. I'm super honored to be here on this podcast, to get to meet your people and to share. Thanks for wanting to hear my story. Yeah, I started loving the performing arts really early. Anything creative, really. My family is, musical and artistic, so I drew from a really early age. Singing, dancing, all that stuff. Took piano. Just loved anything creative. Now athletics, no, pretty terrible at all that. That and video games, that was my brother's. That stunk. But once I had the opportunity to get on stage, I noticed that I definitely liked, if I got lines, if I had any opportunity to have a bigger part. Christmas plays, that's kind of where it started. But that and when my dad would play piano, I had been handed down these like cool nightgowns that I'd put on and like run around the house and pretend to dance. And I kind of lived in a little fantasy world because I was the older sister. I had two younger identical twin brothers, and they'd get into all kind of craziness, and I would just kind of go off on my own and create my own little things. And sometimes I'd put them in plays and direct them, of course, dress them up and all that good stuff. Anyway, to shorten the story, in high school, I had to make a decision between visual art and theater because of the way classes lined up. And at this point, I had decided to become a Christian, and I was starting to notice that when I left visual arts, it took time for my eyes to adjust after focusing on a piece of artwork for so long. And people were talking to me, and I was like, it's like, I feel like kind of out of body right now. Like, I'm having a hard time being here and listening to people. And I felt like being in the theater environment helped me actually connect with people better. I wasn't shy growing up and in my teen development, but I was very insecure. And so there was something about theater that I knew helped me come out of myself. And I didn't know all the reasons I was insecure, but I just knew that it helped me. So that's kind of why it started. When we moved, and they had a good theater program at this high school, and so that helped. I got into a Glitz and Ritz, which was a show choir kind of thing, chorus, all that stuff. And then my theater teacher really believed in me. We called him Mr. G. He sent me to to audition for this honors summer program for like a theater intensive where I got some really amazing training. And then from there, it kind of gave me the hunger to really study more. And I loved the training. I loved being pushed. I loved being challenged. So I decided to study it in college. Ended up actually following that same professor to a nearby university, liberal arts school, really small school, like not one of your theater schools that's your top tier necessarily, but I got a lot of stage time. I got a lot of individual help from my teachers. It was an intimate group of students, so we all got to know each other really well. And I think honestly that God just knew that was what I needed. So I got to write, I got to explore. I ended up making my own major. It was like a theater and English combo because I knew I wanted to write. And when it was time to graduate, everybody would have to do a capstone project. And I knew from, I don't know, probably from my freshman year that I wanted to do some kind of show that I had written. So then I decided on a one-woman show because I wanted to play lots of different characters. And ideally, I wanted to use biblical material because it was a way that I could share my faith. So I ended up landing on the story of David, and I was intrigued by all the women in his life, and I that was a way to keep the story simplified. Instead of choosing women from all around the Bible, you have to explain all these different backstories. It'd be hard for people to follow, but if you focus on one story with all the different women in it, the storylines cross over and it's easier to build. So I wrote this thing called Last Nights of the King, and it developed, over my senior year. I performed it, and then one of my professors says, you could make your career out of this. And I was like, really? Like, I didn't even know if I wanted to technically be an actress. I just knew that everything I loved to do was in the realm of theater, and so maybe if I went that direction, I'd eventually find where I fit. But he said that, and so kind of held on to that, and then started exploring after school, after I graduated, developing the show more, performing it for women's days and events for churches. And it has continued to grow ever since, little bit by little bit, in a very curvy, non-straight road.
Well, not all roads need to be linear to be aligned, right?
Yeah, thank goodness.
I want to actually go back. You just shared a lot, and I loved it. It was very succinct. Loved it.
Oh,
but I want to
that's good.
I want to take some time to visit some of those, I guess, road stops, right? Those.
Sure.
So you said that you became a Christian. What age was that when you decided to?
Yeah, I got really curious. Okay, so I grew up in a movement where my parents became Christians, they'd say in college. They'd grown up religious, but in college they came across this group that invited them to like into their dorms, into these like really controversial and exciting discussions about the Bible and life, and they loved what they saw. So then they joined that movement. So I grew up around this like a very diverse group of people, and I loved what I saw. I saw people who really loved God and were doing their best to love each other. So I grew up around that. I knew that I loved God. I wasn't the rebellious kid, but I certainly was someone who always thought I knew the answers, and that I was, I'm the older sister. I'm the one who'll tell you when you're wrong or when you're sinning. Just not self-righteous at all, But I also knew that, okay, well, to be a Christian, it's not just me believing that Jesus existed, and that there's something I need to really learn about myself. I need to understand what my sin is. I need to repent, even though I didn't fully understand what that meant at the time. But I was interested in digging deeper into the Bible really in middle school. Again, I was kind of that loner who was off, in my head a lot. So people looked at me as a lot more mature than a lot of my peers. But really, right before I entered high school was where I actually had a really bad back problem at the end of middle school that sobered me out a lot, broke me down. I don't know if any of your listeners ever deal with back issues. I had a herniated disc, which is extremely rare to have it, your 7th grade year. And so I had this crazy nerve pain from my lower back all the way down to my feet. Like my legs were on fire and I couldn't sleep. I had to have all these special accommodations made for school so I wouldn't have to carry my book bag or sit down for too long. And it after months and months of this, it took a long time to even figure out what was wrong with me. I finally was like, God, I don't know. Like, I need help. Nobody can help me. The doctors don't know what's wrong. My parents are spending all this money on these tests. I need you. And it was just, I think, a gift that he gave me to experience something in my privileged life that was actually really hard and help me see other people differently and see that I needed him. So anyway, after that, the Bible studies I was doing with the women in my life went a bit more quickly. I saw some things I needed to change in my relationship with my family, with my brothers, my mom. And I became a disciple, got baptized at 14. And I think God spared me from a lot throughout high school. And that really started a journey of trying to understand God's grace, which I really still didn't get very well at that time. But which theater has helped me to grasp, because theater is a reminder that there's not perfection anywhere, but that the rehearsal, the practicing, that you're safe to play, you're safe to explore. And I think that's how God feels about our lives. So anyway, long answer to your question there.
No, listen, there's no long, there's no short. There's just the answer, right? And
love that.
That is that's an interesting take, because what I'm learning more now is that the piece of me that after becoming a disciple, after so I was always a creative. I just didn't know I was a creative, and I wasn't blessed with a space to be creative. Right. And so it wasn't until I got to college where I felt embraced and free, but there's also after I started studying the Bible. Right. And so I had this kind of like dual personality almost, where I was one way with this group of people and then another way with this other group of people. And I had a very difficult time like figuring out who I was, because I didn't spend enough time with me to know me, right? And to learn me. And I think it's very admirable for you to make that decision at such a young age. It's very an impressionable age. So kudos to you for seeing your need for God as early as you did. But in terms of theater, I've always loved performing. Like my whole life, I've always, like, from 6 years old, there were parties. I'm the one in the middle singing and dancing, and I've always been a performer. But I it was this like, how do I express this part of me in a way that felt authentic, that felt genuine, that didn't feel forced? And I found a group of people in college who believed in me, and it was weird because for me they were strangers, right? But this group of strangers, they loved upon me, and they didn't go to my church, and they didn't look like me, and they didn't act like I act, but we all had this love for creating things, and that's where like I really blossomed in digging into the Bible and seeing how creative God is. Like that is I love that you shared, like you're learning more and more about God's grace through performance. Yeah. Right? Because a lot of people, like, I've done live theater almost 20 years now. all forms or fashions of it, whether it's performing comedy or dancing or doing one acts, right? 20 years. And when I say it out loud, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm old. But it's been even more meaningful because I've been doing them with the knowledge of the creator of creativity,
Yeah.
right? And so it hits different when you understand like where it all comes from.
Yeah.
And so that exploratory piece of being able to create and feeling safe to create, I think that's where, so for a lot of my listeners, they feel stuck. They feel as though like their identity has been hidden away with all these titles of mom or of worker, of caretaker, right? All these roles that they play. And so that's honestly why I was so intrigued by your one woman show specifically, last night's with the King. Is this the correct title?
Yeah. Last Night's of the King.
Of the King. Okay, I'm gonna get my grammar right. It's gonna be fantastic. But when I heard about this show, and then specifically that it was about King David, and it was the women who usually don't have a voice. It's the women whose stories are not told. I was just like, all right, God, this there's no like there's no coincidences, right? These are like way too many God winks for me to have come to the space that I'm at now, realizing and understanding the power of stories, and especially of women's stories, and how so many people, specifically women, our stories go untold.
Mm-hmm.
And for the very same reasons that it took me a difficult time to like realize and figure out who I was, because to my family I had this one hat, and to my friends I had this other hat, but I hadn't learned who I was because I wasn't in tune with who created me.
Yeah.
And so that's really like where my passion lies right now, helping women become aligned with who created them so that they are in alignment with who they are.
Yeah.
Right. And sharing those stories and letting those voices be heard. So I'm all right. So you've got me hooked. All right. So here we are. We're in college, and we're doing the thing, and we're being affirmed. Our gifts are being affirmed. Our gifts are being poured into. And now we know that we've got something here. We've got something here with this writing and this one woman play thing. Like, so take us, where did you go next with this? So we have Last Night's of the King. Gonna get that right. How long have you been performing it? Do you have any other acts, plays that you've been doing? Like, I want to hear more, because again, like you're like, you're a unicorn. That's how I feel. Like, you're an absolute unicorn. Because I don't meet a lot of women actresses who are also like gifted writers who perform one act plays with the intention of sharing a woman's story. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
I was like, I thought I was alone.
Yay, we have company.
Right? I was just like, this is, am I the only one, God? That's like, no one else
Man, it can
care
feel
about the story.
so lonely. Man, and that's probably the thing I've struggled with the most throughout my life, is feeling lonely. I will say, there's so many good things you just said. It's like, oh, I'm tempted to respond to all of them. But one thing I want to throw out there is you saying, we're tempted to feel like we can't emerge from under the weight of the roles that we have. And something that I feel like has helped me is getting back to what is the purpose of an artist. God is the creator. It comes from him. For those who are in Christ, we have the Spirit, and it's the spirit of creativity. And so, I'm a big follower of like the Bible Project. And I remember when they first, years ago, they were talking about the Spirit being poured out on Bezalel early on and when the tabernacle was being made, and he was in charge of kind of making sure all the beautiful things were crafted that need to be crafted for this space where God would come and dwell. And it was all to represent Eden, to help remind people that that's where we're from, that's where we're going, that's where God is. God wants to be with us. A reminder of who God is and who we are, and of his desire to be with us. And so it makes me think about, what does it mean to be an artist, if not to help point people to the Eden ideal of being with God somehow, of who God is and who we are and what our place in all this mess is. And so I just wanted to share that because it helps me. Because honestly, in this whole like curvy road of feeling lonely, and also with role confusion, it's like, okay, I didn't start doing the show right away. I got, when you leave theater school, you audition for professional theaters. I didn't get the one I wanted. I wanted to be cast in like a repertory theater where they kind of use the same group of people, over and over again. It's more secure, I guess. I didn't get that. And I even had a connection, and the connection was like, oh, I'm going to pitch you hard for this. And nope, that didn't come through. But I did get a summer stock theater out in Kentucky. And so I went there. After that, I was like, well, I guess I'll go back home and pray about what else I'm going to do. I don't know. So it was lots of long prayers. God, where are you going to send me? I'm in Athens, Georgia. There's not much theater for me here. I'm not far from Atlanta, but I've never liked Atlanta. And so anyway, I started working with the ministry, like the college ministry, and interning. And I love ministry, but during that time, I realized if I don't do something creative, I'm going to explode. And then God, I don't know if you've ever had a super like visceral feeling in your chest where you're very certain about something. I think in my life, it might have been when I performed Last Nights at the King, might have been the first time I had that feeling. It was this is right. Like everything about this is right. I'm sharing something that I'm passionate about. People are here. It's right. So after all this like prayer, uncertainty of what I was doing, the couple that was leading the campus ministry at the time was considering a church planting in Wilmington, North Carolina. And they talked to me about it. And they're like, hey, down the road, we want this planting to start, and we'd love you to come. They do a lot of filming there. Maybe there's a future for you in Wilmington. And I was like, oh, okay. But they were like, it's down the road. It's a couple years away. I'm like, okay. Well, they end up moving up that timeline, but they didn't tell me. And so it's announced at church one morning that they are leaving. And then I had that like really visceral feeling again, and just like kind of a certainty, like I'm going. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to Wilmington. So I went up afterward and told them, well, sign me up. Like I'm your first person. And I started looking for jobs right away. I found, oh my goodness, this is going to date me too. I got on Craigslist and I was looking for job openings, and there was a middle school musical theater teacher job opening for a charter school, because I don't have an education, like degree. And they needed the resume and like this essay and something else in for the application on the next day. And I'm looking at this at like, I don't know, 5 p.m. So I'm like, I could do this job. This would be good for me. Okay. So I pulled an all-nighter, sent all the info in. They contact me, and then they're like, hey, can you be here for an interview like tomorrow? So I pack up all, and there was a weekend where I waited to hear back, but pretty fast. So I pack up all my stuff, all my drama books. I'm like, I'm going to get this job. I'm pretty sure. And it's like 8+ hours to drive to Wilmington. So I get there, do the interview. There are 2 college girls that go to the school in Wilmington, but that's it as far as like church connections. So they're like, okay, we'll get back to you within a week. I'm like, okay, I got to figure out where I'm staying for a week. And then they call me in the next hour. They're like, hey, you got the job. So anyway, when can you start tomorrow? I think they literally had me come in the next day. And these poor students, they had a teacher like leave after the school year had already started. So anyway, I get the job, and then I'm like, oh, I need to find a place to live. I, crashed the college girls' couch, like college dorm room, going backwards in time, and for a couple nights, and they're like, yeah, this isn't working out. I'm like, yeah, and like, well, gee, thanks, guys. But anyway, then I find an apartment, a guy trying to break his lease. I'm like, oh, great. And I'm like, I don't know, you're out of here, right? Can I come and stay tonight? And he's like, yeah, sure. And then I was, God, I didn't have any furniture or anything yet. I'm like, God, I believe you're going to give me something to sleep on tonight. And the guy had an air mattress in his back trunk. And he's like, hey, do you want an air mattress? I'm like, yes. So I don't know. God just answered so many prayers for that chapter of life, got me to Wilmington. I was learning to teach. I wasn't doing my show though. I was just a part of the planting, figuring things out. But I did start doing film, and so I got my first agent there. And what helped me get my agent was there had been a brother in the church who'd filmed me doing Last Nights of the King, not live, but in a theater, and he had even written music to go with it, just out of the generosity of his heart. I paid him like a pittance based on the amount of work he did. So my agent was able to see some of that footage and was like, okay, yeah. And then this agent had some great connections with casting directors, and she got me into, well, I say she got me in, it's a team effort. You do your best, and you're cast for what you put out there. But I got a small role in the Hunger Games and in a few other films, and a Hallmark movie. And so I didn't realize at the time what a big deal that was. My first film was a Hallmark movie, and that was the first film I ever auditioned for. And now I'm saying this from a vantage point where I've been in Nashville almost 8 years, and I haven't booked a single movie while I've been here. So anyway, so God gave me a lot of blessing in Wilmington. Yeah, I just was starting to connect with the theater community. I did the first play I was in Wilmington was Sound of Music, and I got to play Maria, which was one of my dream roles. And and Wilmington was only a 2-year chapter of my life. I ended up, man, this is a long story, but I ended up in overseas because I was dating a guy over there for half a year. And that was because I went to this European singles conference through our church fellowship with my roommate at the time when I was in Wilmington. She wanted to go to Germany, and I had this movie check, and I was like, well, let's go. So so we went. She wanted to meet a guy. She didn't. I did. And we had this long distance relationship. And I came back from that. That didn't work out. God knows what's best. And then momentum kind of stopped after that. I moved back in with my folks. I was like, I don't want to date anymore. And I went back to the ministry, interning again. And I'm like, all right, here I am. And I did some more shows. I edited Last Nights, kind of revamped it. And God worked on my heart. Eventually, I opened up again to wanting to put myself out there, not just with my career and like figure out what does it look like to have an artistic career, but also, okay, maybe I do actually want to be married. And if God's willing for that, I should probably ask people for help. And so I sent an email out to all of the people in ministry that I knew, which at this point was kind of a lot of people because I'd bopped around. And I was like, hey, I'm single. If you want to set me up, go for it. I'll drive. And I don't know what shifted in my heart, because I was always extremely private about love life, but I don't know. So I started going on some dates, met some cool guys, but no sparks or anything. But my heart had shifted. So eventually I did end up at a New Year's party where I met my husband, And lots of answered prayers there. That's a different story. His name's TJ. He's wonderful. And when it was before we got married, we were still dating. I had a couple more performances of Last Nights at the King, and he came and helped and like photographed for me. He likes to be behind the camera. Was super supportive. I had a table to promote myself at one of our conferences that we have in the Southeast. Douglas Jacoby had graciously shared part of his table with me so I could promote, and TJ would stand at the table and like promote for me. And everybody would come by and think, your boyfriend, he really thinks you're great, so I knew I had a good one. And he lived in Nashville at the time, although we're both from Georgia and could have met on many occasions. And so after dating for a while, I moved to Nashville and we got married. Since then, he's been like my stage manager, my tech person, my support, and God has blessed me so much through my partnership with him. It's kind of crazy to say how much, because okay, here back to the role thing. One of the hardest things that I have dealt with is being grateful for what I have. I have a great husband who has a secure job with benefits, and with a salary that we can live on. So I have this freedom to be able to perform and to be able to write and to be able to volunteer. And I tell you what, I don't know why, but it has been so hard for me in this day and age, maybe, to be okay with that and to not feel this guilt for like, oh man, I'm so lucky. Or, I want to bring in money, I want to help out. And so that has been something that God has been teaching me, to just be surrendered. When I set out to do this, it was, God, I want this to be for you. I want to help people be inspired to read your word and to see themselves in your story. So it is now a daily battle, really, to keep surrendering that and trust that he will open the doors, and then also to actually ask for help and ask for those doors to be opened as well. So since we got married, it's been, I got a new agent in Nashville. I've done some things, mostly commercial, industrial, but the shows have grown. I have had people have asked me do you have something for Easter? Do you have something for Christmas? So I ended up writing shows from the perspective of Mary to meet those needs. So the products kind of have continued to grow. And then I don't know if you're familiar, Jory, with the Bema podcast. Yeah, okay, awesome. I love them too. And I've been listening to them for quite some time, since before COVID, and following them in their Slack space. Had reached out a few times to Marty with various questions because of my time spent studying David, actually. And he'd been responsive, and he knew I was an artist. So this last year, he actually reached out and asked if I'd be willing to dramatize an idea that he had by the work of a theologian that died last year named Frederick Buechner. He had a piece called The Birth, about the Christmas story. So I was thrilled. I was like, yeah, I would love to. That'd be awesome. And so I ended up, doing a one woman show where I played the wise man, the shepherd, the who else am I forgetting? Oh, the innkeeper, and a few other side characters. And I kind of put it all together and filmed it, edited it even. Like, it was a massive project for me. But God has brought those opportunities around, and people have just asked me to create something. And so I'm very grateful for that. So anyway, I guess that's the long and short of it. I am just fighting to be grateful and surrendered and to trust what he has in store for this career. Also very grateful for the people who ask the questions like, well, how do you even define a career, Katie? Does it have to be a certain way in your mind for you to be content with it? or how do you define success? Those are hard for me. I told TJ, it's hard to be dependent on you. And people have been telling me for so long that I'm so good at what I do. Like these doors should just be opening. But when I step back, it's like, okay, God actually is opening doors. They're just maybe not as fast as I want them to open.
Yes, God's timing is not our timing. But he is perfect. His timing is perfect. Just may not fall in line with our clocks. And we just experienced a daylight savings time.
Oh boy, yes.
So you shared a lot of good stuff there. There are two areas that I kind of want to, I guess, point to because, again, of the humans that listen to this podcast, majority women, believing women who they feel like they do have a gift, they feel like they do have a purpose, they have a voice, they're just having a really tough time like expressing it and kind of releasing it. I used to be discouraged by the thought of being solely dependent on my spouse. I was like, no, I want to make my own money. I want to do my own things. And now, like, we've been together like 12 years, well, 15 together, 12 married. And now I'm like, okay, baby, I need you to get a raise so I cannot work anymore. So I can lean into this thing that I was made to do. I feel called to do. But I've been too afraid to like take the plunge and like jump all in. Right. And so hearing you speak of those fears coming from the other end where God kind of already set you up so that you could be exploratory, you could, securely, not worry about, okay, was rent being paid if I don't get a gig is, so that's a very interesting, take on that, I feel, because I've always wondered like how, I still don't know like how I would function or feel. Like, that's what I think I want. I don't know if I really do want that. And I don't know if maybe like God has not allowed it to happen because he knows better than I do. Like, you're not gonna be happy about that. So just stay where you are. Trust me and go along with the process. But the other part that you touched on, I think, and it was, I kind of got like goosebumps and I tried my best. I keep myself muted so like I don't like interject because I always want to be like, yes, that's so good. And but you said that you believe that God allows you to be in the space that you are in terms of theater so that you can creatively display to others like how impactful or something you use words to say like you want people to be intrigued or interested in reading
to see themselves in the story.
Yes. And I find that very interesting because I know I speak with writers and I speak with people who write songs and in poetry, and there's a lot of imagery, a lot of use of language to help convey messages that would lead someone to desire to want to like become more inquisitive about, okay, well, what is that subject matter? I kind of want more. How do you go about doing that via visual art? Because although it's not fine art, it's not sculpting, it's not painting, it is visual. It's very visual. How do you go about doing that right where you kind of want them to want more of what you're giving them? Because when I speak with other performing artists, they want the whole experience needs to happen during that like 45 to 90-minute time frame that they are with the audience. Like, I want to take them on this journey. I want them to start here. I want them to have the climax, and I want them, boom, we're gonna have the crescendo. It's gonna be great, and we're gonna have the resolution. I'm satisfied, and then I leave. But what it sounds like you're doing is, okay, I want the beginning. We're gonna climax, and then I'm gonna leave you cliffhanger, and you get to your own resolution in the Word of God. Like, how do you?
That's a cool way to put it. I guess that is true to an extent. I mean, I do think the pieces have resolution within them. So there might be some people who walk away and are like, "Oh, that was really cool." Well, but there have been so many comments that I've had with exchanges with people after a show where, they were like, "I just never thought about this character," or, thought that she would have felt that way. And honestly, some men have given me the most impactful comments, because they often really don't think about the women, so I know it's not all the men, but and the comments that have meant the most to me are when I'm talking to a sister and she comes up with me with like tears in her eyes, just saying like, "That's my experience, what you said, how you performed that." And I mean, it just makes me want to cry, because then I just feel so honored that something that I'm just trying to imagine, I'm just trying to wrap my brain around what these women experienced, but that actually is reality for so many women, even today, aspects of what these women went through, that I can have this special emotional moment with somebody just because, the performance was like a bridge. And it's just like, wow, God, what an honor to be like, I feel like you're gifting me with someone sharing this emotion with me as if I'm somebody special, but it's just your story that's doing this. So that's what I love about the show. I don't know that there's anything super unique about how the art is crafted to connect with people. I think it's just people seeing the stories are relatable. Like, if you tell a true story, people can relate, see themselves in it, connect in some way. And I think that's what hooks me when I see something that sticks with me. To give you maybe a bit of a glimpse, and to give your listeners a bit of a glimpse, the women in the last Nights of the King, now originally there were 13 that I had, and had to narrow it down to 7. So there were some like super unknown ones, like Mephibosheth's nurse who drops him and he becomes a cripple. That's Jonathan's son. Jonathan is David's best friend. There's Ritzbah, who was Saul's concubine. She's probably my favorite character to play in the show. And she loses her sons because of Saul's mistake, but then also David's sin. And she guards their dead bodies for the entire harvest season until David comes to bury them. So she is like such a fighter for justice. And there's a couple paragraphs about her, which, if we're talking like ancient literature here, that's saying a lot for there to be 2 paragraphs about a woman, and a concubine at that. And so I do think there's a lot more even about the women in the Old Testament, well, and throughout the Bible, that a lot more than even we think there is, because maybe it's just not taught on as much. So I've been really inspired. The more and more I've studied about women, and I'm certainly not an expert, but I've been inspired to see how much God loves women and gives freedom to women to prophesy and to teach and to lead, and like to do so much more than we might think women actually did. So anyway, I think showing all those things, I think trying to tell an emotionally honest story helps people connect. And I mean, when I perform, I think I'm just a natural empath. I really do put out all my like sweat and tears and snot and everything. Like it comes out. And I try to infuse humor too, so it's not just a drama fest. So I hope that answers your question.
I always love your long answers because it does so much good. So much good is coming out of it. So I want to land the plane because the show is called 30 Minutes of Power, and I always go over time. Just because I'm just so it's like and I'm not one of those humans that like, oh, I'm gonna cut this part, I'm gonna cut that. No. I don't cut anything out. So I always gotta kind of like be mindful to keep it in the 30-minute space. Sometimes we've gone an hour. It's okay, it's fine. But the idea that your goal and your focus is to tell an honest story that people currently can resonate with, although the characters are centuries years old, right? Like,
Yeah.
it speaks to the point of how the Bible is relevant always, right?
Yeah.
In all contexts. So that's so good. I definitely want to have you back because I would love to dive more into this, these findings that you've uncovered, these gems that you've stumbled upon in looking at the lives of the women, not only during the first century, but in the Old Testament, in the giftings and the positions that they held and the responsibilities and their roles, because that's something I'm becoming more and more aware of as I dig deeper into the Bible about my role. What is my role? And I think first and foremost, my role is to be a reflection of God to the world. I think that's number one. And then all the other subsequent roles, they are less of importance in that respect. But a woman's role is something I think that a lot of people are now looking at and being open to maybe redefining what they believe and redefining how they move based off of not what the culture is doing, not because it's popular right now, but because it's what God says. So that's, we're gonna have a lot of fun together. And so what people don't know is that Katie has agreed to come to New York to do a show for us. So please keep your ears peeled to the podcast. If you are on our newsletter, if you have us followed on Instagram at 30 Minutes of Power, please keep your ears posted because when she comes, I'm going to be super excited. I'm going to shout it from the rooftops because I believe just as the stories of the women of the Old Testament need to be told and heard and experienced, I believe our stories need to be told and heard and experienced as well. And I'm so grateful for you sharing your story with us here at 30 Minutes of Power. Katie, where can people find you? All the plugs, all the shares. I will also put them in the show notes. But where can people find you?
Yeah, sure thing. You can find me at katiedelrocco.com. All my socials and stuff are there, but it's Katie Del Rocco across the board.
See, a woman after my own heart. Just keep it simple. Just keep it simple.
I can't keep track of all these things.
Right? Hello, love it. Love every aspect of it. Well, thank you again so much for blessing us with your time here. 30 minutes of power.
Thank you, Jory.
Jory O'Neill saying, be an empowered woman, using your power to empower others. Till next time, people. Peace. Thank you for listening. We pray you have been empowered by the message. If you'd like to be a part of the conversation, join our free Facebook group, AZ Iron Sharpens Iron. Every Monday, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, meet us back here for another session of empowerment. Share this episode with another woman who needs to be empowered. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, be an empowered woman using your power to empower others.
30 minutes of power.